Hello everyone, I'm Asha Nayaswami and we're continuing our morning satsangs. So let us begin with the prayer. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, Friend, Beloved God, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahasaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, Beloved Master, Paramahansa Yogananda, Saints of all religions, dearest friend, Swami Kriyananda, humbly we bow to you all. Guide us and bless us, that our thoughts and our feelings and our aspirations remain always focused on your presence. Help us to be your instruments of love and kindness, of wisdom and joy in all that we do. Om. Peace. Amen. I was thinking about today's topic is called Personal and Planetary Evolution, which is actually the name of a class series that I gave many times starting in the early 80s about, personal and planetary evolution. It was based on an idea of trying to talk about the Yugas, which is something that we refer to a lot. I'm going to hold up this book. It's by Joseph Selby and David Steinmetz. David Steinmetz, known within Ananda. These men are known. David Steinmetz is known as Vyasa within Ananda, and Joseph Selby is known as Purushottama. Vyasa has made a lifelong study of the Yugas. The Yugas are these great ages of planetary rising and falling refinement on planets, any planet, as we go through the different ages of enlightenment and disintegration again into lesser stages of enlightenment. The Yugas are described in the Holy Science, and they're also described in Autobiography of a Yogi briefly, because it's an ancient Indian tradition. Vyasa, who was a scientist by nature, this was his hobby for decades, and then he combined with Purushottama, and together they created this book, which is absolutely fascinating. It's a brilliant piece of work and unique, and I highly recommend it. It's published by Crystal Clarity, which is Ananda's publication business. You can probably get it on Amazon or anywhere you want to look. People have time to read. Now is the time to read. I myself, who knew a great deal about this subject when I read the book, was nonetheless, it's just put together in a way that is really helpful. Now, the reason I'm putting so much emphasis on this is I've talked about karma, I've talked about reincarnation, suffering, all these different things in these broadcasts, because we are in this very interesting, unpredictable period of transition, socially, globally, economically. God knows really where we're going or what we're doing. And the Yugas, as a backdrop to this, are part of what helps make it comprehensible. When I first began seriously having responsibility for trying to educate people in the teachings of self-realization as Master taught it and as Swami articulated it, I really had to see, because my job for a long time was, you might say, on the front lines. I was often the first person that people would meet, just because I was traveling a lot. I was speaking in venues that, especially in the early years when there weren't that many Ananda venues, I was just speaking everywhere. So I tried to think, what do people need to know to really understand sort of what Ananda life is? And the Yugas, the fact of the Yugas and where we are in what we call the Yuga cycle, is a really critical part of the mindset of a devotee of Yogananda. It has a lot to do, and really has a lot to do with the particular nature of Ananda, what we're committed to and why we're committed to it. So let me talk about this, and some of you are familiar, but it helps to just get a basic concept here. The Yugas and the tradition of there being higher and lower ages of civilization on a planet is not unique to the Indian culture. Almost every traditional culture has some story about it. The age of gods, of demigods, of heroes, and of man. The Golden Age, the Silver Age, the Bronze Age, and the Iron Age. Traditional societies almost all have some story of when the age was higher, when the age was lower. And what that means is that the whole tone of civilization on the globe has a certain characteristic to it. And I'm not going to teach the yugas itself, because you can get this from this book, or you can Google on my YouTube channel or on the audio recordings on Ananda Palo Alto under Asha's name, Personal and Planetary Evolution. You'll find it. So it's just the fact of that. But the way Sri Yukteswar and Yogananda describe this, the yugas are actually a physical phenomenon that are based on astronomy, not on astrology, but on astronomy. And it's based on the idea that every galaxy has a center of energy, and that part of the principle of this one is that a solar system moves around, and it comes closer and then farther away from that galactic center. When I don't have a very good physical visualization capacity for geometrics exactly. And I remember when I was really trying to understand this, I was having breakfast at the seclusion retreat, and Jyotish was there, and I asked Jyotish to just try to explain it to me. And I remember he picked up an orange and an egg, and he showed me with an orange and an egg sort of how this works. So whenever I visualize it, I think of an orange and an egg. But you have the whole solar system, and it moves closer and farther away. Now, there's astronomical reasons why this happens, and I'm not going to try. I'm just going to tell you. It's here in the book. But what that means is that the whole solar system is closer to the energy source, and when it's closer to the energy source, everything is more vibrant. There's more power coming in, and therefore the vibration of the planet itself is quite different. So it gets closer and then it moves away. And according to the way Sri Yukteswar explains it, this is a 24,000 year cycle. So it's not like in the course of one lifetime we're winging around like this. This is a very slow evolution, and it's circular. So when we're in the part of the orbit where we're moving toward the center, everything gradually energizes, gradually enlightens until it becomes very enlightened. Then it peaks, and then it begins to move away. And then we begin to lose knowledge, we begin to lose understanding, and we forget how things are done. Then we reach the nadir, we turn, and we go back. The nadir of the cycle that we're in was 500 years after the time of Christ. And the four ages are Kali, Dwapara, Treta, and Satya. Kali is matter, Dwapara is energy, Treta is the power of thought, and Satya is the power of spirit. In Satya Yuga, as Swami put it to me, people like us are in charge, and the whole world is like Ananda. And you don't even, it's beautifully put, you don't even have religious ceremonies anymore, because spirituality is so part of life that there's no necessity. People just live in attunement. And as you get into a more material age, everything has to become more dense and gross to be perceived by the mind. And so Kali Yuga started ascending at 500 AD, and and every yuga has a transition period, and then the yuga itself. The higher ages are longer than the lower ages. Dwapara Yuga is 2,400 years with 200 years of transition on either side. The transition into Dwapara began in 1700. Dwapara proper began in 1900. Everything in our world has transformed since 1900. This huge influx of energy and technology, we shifted from human power into more subtle power. It's interesting, I don't know if they still use it, but they used to measure the power of an engine as horsepower. because it was the only way people could think. There's an engine. How strong is that engine? Well, it's as strong as 5 horses. It's 5 horsepower. I mean, now no one has any idea how much power a horse has. But at that transition time, that was the only way to explain it. Now, what that means is that since 1900, we have been in this rapidly shifting period of time, but we're not that far away from Kali Yuga, which is why it's so tempestuous right now. These transitions, even ascending, can often be very tempestuous, and coming down, they're also very tempestuous. So what this means is that all over creation, and Master says there are countless planets, and all the planets, whatever galaxies they're in, all those different galaxies, everyone has a center, everyone is following the same Yuga cycle. So that is planetary evolution. So Earth itself will be an environment that is sometimes more enlightened than other times. Now, what's really important to understand is that is the environment that's created as a physical reality in relationship to the source of energy. Of course, these are subtle realities, but they're still there. But that is not the evolution of the soul. So that is like, there's planetary evolution, but in a sense, evolution isn't the right word. It's more like planetary cycles, because Earth is not, Earth is a living being, but Earth is not going to become enlightened per se. That is the soul drama of the individual, if that makes sense. Earth is a living being because there are gods and goddesses and angelic beings who run the story. So there's a living consciousness there, but Earth is not going to attain self-realization. Swami said that a planet is dissolved for one of two reasons. Either everyone becomes perfectly free, or everyone becomes so dark. He said, but it doesn't happen that often. And he said, it's not going to happen to this one. So, I mean, that's just a statement. So that's planetary changes. But the real drama that concerns us is soul evolution, individual, personal soul evolution. And the soul does evolve in the sense that its realization evolves. It doesn't evolve in the sense that it doesn't become suddenly more part of God. It's how much mud covers our realization of who and what we really are. And the soul drama takes place on any number of backgrounds. And sometimes what we need is to be in a very enlightened age, and sometimes what we need is to be in a very dark age, depending entirely on the personal karma, which is to say the lessons we have still to learn, and what environment will give us the best opportunity to learn it. Personal evolution is completely independent of the Yuga cycle. We choose to be wherever it's helpful. So Jesus appeared in Kali Yuga descending. He came and he set the tone. In fact, a great many, great spiritual figures, the whole Mahabharata was in the transition of Dwapara Yuga going down into Kali Yuga. The Mahabharata and Krishna's incarnation in the Bhagavad Gita, Veda Vyasa writing the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, they all came to create something helpful, all going through this dark age. Jesus set this tremendous power in place, and many great souls who attained self-realization came with him because it was the right atmosphere for them. So think of it like this. We're in the astral world, and we're suddenly compelled by our inner karma to leave the astral world and come to the material world. I joke about it. I think about it like this. One is sitting at home. One has a plan. I'm going to meditate tonight, then I'm going to read a good book, then I'll do a few yoga postures, and maybe I'll energize again just before I go to bed. It's going to be all like that. And somewhere in the middle of that, you start thinking about a pizza. And then just this idea of the pizza just keeps bothering you. And let's say this was the time before home delivery was not so easy and we weren't sheltered in place. So at some point, even without your knowing why, you find yourself in the car driving to get the pizza. And then when you get to the pizza parlor, lo and behold, an old friend is sitting there eating his pizza. So instead of taking the pizza home, you just sit down with that friend. And when you finally get home 3 hours later, you see your mala where you left it in your little meditation stool. And you remembered I had a very different plan, but this desire arose and took me somewhere else. As I understand it, and this is partly fanciful on my part, we're in the astral world, everything is great, and then we start thinking about pizza. We just start, some unfulfilled desire, some unfulfilled longing just moves us, and we're off and running again. Master said the reason the baby cries when it's born is because it takes in that first breath of air and it realizes, oh my gosh, look what I've done. I'm back in the material plane. Here I am. The wise baby just says, I'm here for a reason. Now, when our soul is thinking about that, and if we're evolved at all, it's a decision that's made more consciously. It depends on how conscious you are. People who are not very conscious of planes beyond the physical, Master said, never really wake up in the astral world. He called it sort of like a gray dream is what he called it. They sort of live in a gray, misty world, and they don't really wake up until they have a physical body again, because they can't relate to the subtlety of the astral world, so they really literally can't really see it. But when they have a body, all of a sudden, oh, I know what this is, and they start using their body again. Very refined souls are distressed to have a body, not pleased to have it. So we're there in the astral world, and we need a certain combination of things in order for us to be able to work out the karma that's up for us. So in a sense, again, these are just images because I can't really say exactly how it works, but I know this is the mechanism. You look out over all of creation, and Master said there are endless choices. Swami asked Master, do we always incarnate on Earth? Master said, no, you have countless choices. So you look at all those planets and you say, oh, well, that one's in Satya Yuga, this one is in Treta, this is Kali Yuga descending. What's going to work for me? Kali Yuga descending, for example, has this very interesting advantage. Many of the first Christians completely turned their back on society. There was no point at all in trying to build for the future because the barbarians were coming at 500 AD. One of the things that I learned from Vyasa years ago was, because I don't know history, but he presented it to me in this way. The barbarians just swept through and destroyed everything, virtually. They burned libraries, they destroyed civilizations. So there was no point. There was no value in trying to build anything external because the material forces were going to wreck it. The pyramids endured, some things endured, but much was destroyed. So they got to, and I put it like that, they got to go into cloistered monasteries, they got to go into caves, they got to go in the Himalayas, and they just washed their hands of trying to build a work because it just wasn't the time to do it. And also the contrast between material and spiritual was so extreme that you just made a very solid choice. And sitting in the astral world, you could say, that would be perfect for me. This is exactly what I need right now. That's just the right lifetime for me. And maybe I need to be thrown to the lions. Maybe I need to be able to be a Christian at a time when being a Christian is extremely dangerous. And I'm going to be ripped away from everything I love and just thrown to the lions and killed. That would be a good experience. That's just what I need. The courage of my convictions, the detachment from the world, facing into terrible fears. That's a good one for me. I think I'll go be eaten by a lion. Because soul evolution is completely independent. We drop into a life, we learn what we're supposed to learn, we take our consciousness and we go on. We're not building anything. Now, where we are now, Kali Yuga shifting into Dwapara, and Krishna and Arjuna came when Dwapara was descending into Kali Yuga, Krishna as Babaji and Arjuna as Master, because Master says it, they're the same souls. They're at the same place, except it was going down, and now it's going up. And Krishna and Arjuna helped transition it down. Krishna and Arjuna, Yogananda and Babaji are helping it to go up. But see, now everybody's waking up. So now, instead of getting to go off to the Himalayas, we have to live in Mumbai, and we have to live in Seattle, and we have to live in Palo Alto, because we have to plant seeds that actually will not be destroyed, but will actually flower, and the time will come. Master said, self-realization has come to unite all religions, not as religions, but the principle of self-realization will be seen as the unifying force. And so those of us who chose to come here, come with Swamiji, are fulfilling the role that Swamiji has played multiple times in Master's life, where he's the next generation. He's essentially the son, spiritually or physically. Many of us are the children of Swamiji, and so we come to help build this. So we don't get to go off to the Himalayas. So somewhere up in the astral world, this seemed like a good idea. Oh, speaking of myself, I have a gift of, I'll use called a gift of gab, whatever it is. Swamiji actually, he looked at my hand once. Let me see if I can say this properly. He looked at the way these two fingers lean on each other, and he basically said, the gift of articulation is tied to Dharma. If you ever try to use it for something that isn't Dharmic, you will lose it instantly. He told me that like 1973. He just looked at my hand. I don't have any idea of the basis of that, but I've always remembered it. But I understand that I have used the gift of persuasion. I have used it to persuade people to lots of causes that ultimately were not worth the sacrifice that I asked people to make. I read about some woman, I have no idea, I'm not claiming this as a past life. A psychic told me, quote, "You helped start the French Revolution." But I have no idea if that's true, but it's apocryphal. And I read about a woman who was very instrumental in stirring people up and getting it going, and then was appalled by what came of it, and then spent the rest of her life trying to correct it. Well, it's crossed my mind that I have used this gift not for the highest dharma, maybe sincere, maybe for self-interest, who knows. So I have to talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and try to persuade people to a higher truth until it's balanced. Well, gosh, this is a perfect incarnation to do it, isn't it? Because we have to introduce to the world and to the West this entire new way of thinking, and just try to get people persuaded. So I'm there in the astral world. I have this huge karmic debt to pay, this karmic debt of the misuse of the power of persuasion. So now I have to use the power of persuasion correctly. Wow! Kali Yuga, going into Dwapara, coming again with Swamiji, learning from him, and then just pouring out those words. That would be a good thing to do. And there'll be an internet, and I can do all of this. Super, I get to work out this karma. Oh, solitude in a cave. Oh, just washing my hands of all of this. No, not for me, not this time. So you see like that? But if I didn't have this debt, this wouldn't have been a good incarnation for me. If I was ready just to meditate and didn't have an obligation, this wouldn't have been a good incarnation for me. So all of us, one way or another. Now, I read yesterday, someone sent me just a brief thing from David Frowley, who's a very well-known Vedic scholar and astrologer, just very brief. I mean, there's been lots of astrological explanations of what's going on now. And, he added some pretty deep thoughts about it's going to be a tempestuous time. So did Yogananda. Everybody says it's going to be some decades of complicated shifting where nobody gets to be secure. Dwapara Yuga altogether, unfortunately, is not a very secure age. It may be a little better than Kali, but the problem is our power, our technological power, is greater than our moral fiber. And so it's a mixed age. It's an age in which people who like to have power and are very clever with that sort of thing also get to use it. They get to abuse that. So then they get karmic debts like mine, and then they'll have to balance it. But somebody's in the astral world and say, oh, I need to destroy. I need to destroy some stuff. I need to misuse power. So look, I'm going to go right there because then I can be this person and I can misuse power. And what's the odd thing about it is God is on everybody's side, because everybody has a God-given opportunity to evolve in the way that they need. But evil is not put against good, and righteousness is not put against unrighteousness, unless both of them know that that's what they need. So if this is what you need, you will incarnate where someone will offer it to you. And if this is what you need, you'll incarnate where you can offer it to him. This is just how it works. And this is the planetary, the personal evolution that the planetary evolution serves. You have to think of planetary evolution as like the backdrop in a great dramatic performance. The backdrop sort of tells us where we are, what we're doing, what the conditions are, what the language is, what the temperament is. When we were in Israel, there was, because we were in January, I was in Israel, the Jewish people, and I was born into a Jewish family, so this is something that's very vivid to me. And we went to the Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Museum is what it's called, which is really one of the most creative and brilliant presentations. I'm not an expert in these things, but it was extraordinary. It's an extraordinary documentation of a stunning moment in human history. And then you still see the Israelis are in such this terrible struggle politically. So you ask, what is going on here? Well, the proper use of power as a manifestation of God is a huge learning that every soul has to go through. In the definitions of the delusion, sexuality, intoxication, and money, it's usually called. But money represents power. That's what it is. It's the use of power that's very complicated. How do I use the power? And the question, am I a victim or a perpetrator? And that is a necessary karmic lesson that souls have to go through. So each of these ethnicities, cultures, languages, countries, they have characteristics. And so we think about, what do I need? Do I need, is my learning about power to be allowed to abuse power so that I can learn that karmic lesson? Is my lesson about power that I get to be the victim of other people's abuse so I can learn how to rise above circumstances and find God even in the midst of suffering? You see, everybody has something different to learn. And all of these vibrations on all of these planets are held there for the benefit of the individual soul. That's what I mean about the planet itself is not an individual soul. It's not going to be self-realized, but as a conscious force, it's going to serve the self-realization of individual souls. And of course, we're individual souls. So here we are, folks. Here we are because, as we often say, it seemed like a good idea at the time. And if we're lucky and can go deep enough within ourselves, and we are lucky, by the grace of God, in the midst of whatever, we will be able to feel that divine grace that drew us here, that divine grace which sustains us, and that divine grace which will help us fulfill the divine reason why we incarnated. That should be our prayer. Lord, give me the courage, the wisdom, the humility, and the receptivity to learn whatever it is that you want to teach me. God bless you.